Teshtele everyone. Hello and welcome to another monthly episode of our Tibet Talks. I am Denji Gyatso, your host today. I'm Interim Vice President and Director of Outreach at International Campaign for Tibet. We started this Tibet Talks in May 2020 as we were facing the huge challenge of dealing with the coronavirus pandemic. We reflected on words of His Holiness the Dalai Lama, who has always called for genuine global cooperation among nations and amongst people to deal with existential issues that we face, from climate change to violence inspired by religion and political fervor, to the urgent need for love and compassion as the best and most effective way to bring about peace and a more just world for all of us. And through this series of Tibet Talks, we endeavored to bring you guests who have been inspired by His Holiness and who take action to support his vision for the future well-being of humanity and our planet. And these are values that are from the foundation, that form the foundation of Tibetan culture and identity that is being suppressed and destroyed in Tibet. Joining us today, we have two special guests. Our first guest is founder and publisher of Kokila, and imprint of Penguin Young Readers, dedicated to centering stories from the margins. She is editor of numerous award-winning children's books, and she previously held editorial positions at HarperCollins and Simon & Schuster. She also grew up in Afghanistan, India, Canada, Pakistan, Germany, Poland, and now calls New York City her home. And but more importantly, she is the person behind His Holiness the Dalai Lama's first children's book titled The Seed of Compassion, Lessons from the Life and Teachings of His Holiness the Dalai Lama. Please join me to welcome Namrata Tripathi. Namrata, thank you so much for joining us. And
thank you
welcome.
so much for having me. Thank you.
Thank you. Joining us also from Atlanta, Georgia, is Executive Director of the Center for Contemplative Science and Compassion-Based Ethics. And among many things, he is also the developer of cognitively based compassion training, a secular method of cultivating compassion based on the Tibetan tradition of mind training. He completed his Geshe Haramba degree at Drepung Loseling Monastery in South India, and he also holds a PhD from Emory University. He spearheads the Emory Tibet Science Initiative, as well as the C-Learning, the Social, Emotional, Ethical Learning Program, a K-12 educational framework curriculum. So please join me also to welcome Professor Lobsang Negi.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Jenna, thank you both for joining us today. It's really an honor to have you both here on Tibet Talks. And before beginning, I just wanted to let our listeners know that we'll be taking audience questions at the end of the conversation. So please feel free to send your questions, either email them to comments@savetibet.org, or you can post them in the comment section of our Facebook live stream right here below. So Namrata, I want to start the conversation with you. Can you tell us, share a little bit about yourself and about Kokila? It's such an interesting publishing entity that you have created. So can you share a little bit about that?
Absolutely, I'd be delighted. Thank you. So I am, as you mentioned, the publisher at Kokila, which is a children's book imprint at Penguin Random House. And I had come up in my career always working in children's books at various houses. So as you said, at HarperCollins, Simon & Schuster, and at Disney as well. And some years back, all along the way, I sort of would pay attention to what are the books we're making and who are they for? Because one of the things that I think we all understand is that as a society, we tend to make books about the things we care about. it's a way of revealing what and who we value. And so often, children's books, American children's literature wasn't really reflecting the lives of kids who were either kids of color, queer kids, kids from the margins in different ways, kids with abilities, things like this. And there was really an opportunity to create books that reflected their lives, that brought about a sort of sense of joyfulness and really acknowledged their humanity. And so some years back when I was working at Penguin, I approached the president of our division to say, I feel like there's a bit of an opportunity here. Many people across the industry, of course, have been doing this work for decades and decades, but I felt like I could be doing more personally. And I wondered if there would be a chance to create an imprint where you would not just focus on representation on the page, meaning in the characters you see in the books, and not just also in the creators, which means the authors and the illustrators, but in the gatekeepers. That's all of us, the publishers, the editors, the designers, who create and shape the book. Because we know that if you're looking at it through purely a white or sort of culturally dominant gaze, a lot of the nuances can sometimes be sloughed off. And so I had hoped that we could make a community of creators come together where we would have the opportunity to make our most dynamic work, to hopefully make books that would reflect the world that we actually live in, as diverse as it is, and to make, to do the most exciting, beautifully told storytelling. And so that's how Kokila was born. That was in 2017, I pitched this. In 2018, we announced. And then in the year 2019, we started our first books. And since then, we've published picture books, middle grade, young adult, graphic novels, fiction and nonfiction. We do a little bit of everything. And it's been exciting to see how the books have been received. There's a lot of award winners, there's bestsellers on the list. There's also a lot of books that I feel like may not have existed anywhere else if we hadn't created this home for them. And that's probably what I'm proudest of. So it was, that's sort of the origin of Kokila, and part of where the story for the Seed of Compassion began as well.
And very much relevant for our times today, your books reaching us. And with that, as you mentioned, Seed of Compassion, I'm going to show a little clip here that I found that you had created that tells you a little bit about the book. So let me play that for our viewers.
We all have the seed of compassion inside of us. It's up to us to nurture that seed in ourselves and in others. Written by His Holiness, the Dalai Lama, a celebration of love and compassion to inspire the youngest readers. Available wherever books are sold.
It's such a beautiful book, Namrata. So I want to ask you, had you met His Holiness before you came up with this, and how did you approach it, and how did it come about?
Yeah, so I had the opportunity to hear His Holiness speak once in New York City in Central Park when I was probably still in university, and then had the chance to meet him in Canada, maybe, I don't know, 15, 17 years ago. It was quite some time ago. My parents were diplomats for India, and my mother was posted there, and she had let me know that she would be having an audience with His Holiness. And so I was in New York City, and I said, I'll be right there. And I flew to Canada so that I could accompany her, because I was just so excited to be able to have that chance. And in that meeting, had the opportunity to hear His Holiness speak about not just himself and his childhood. He also knew my great uncle and told me some stories about him, which was quite remarkable to me. And I was really affected by the experience of having this moment of direct conversation, this feeling that although this was someone I admired so much, could always see speaking, on the television or kind of at a distance, there was a feeling of sort of closeness that every human can relate one to one, that you are sort of worthy of that kind of direct communication and moment of, I don't know, generosity, connection, intimacy that happens between humans. And so that really stayed in my mind. And as I continued to make books for children, there was something in that I couldn't quite let go of about how powerful a feeling it was and how empowering a feeling it was to have had that experience. So when I started Kokila, I really started to think about how it would be so wonderful for all kids to have that experience, to get to hear from His Holiness directly, to have that moment of connection and contact. And because of two things. One, he I'd seen so many different clips of him speaking about his own childhood, about how he was a little bit naughty, about the way that he was so close to his mother, and it felt so universal. You hear all children can be like this, and it was a moment of connection I think all kids could feel. And on the other side, that sense of direct address would, I think, make kids feel that their voices were important, that their point of view was important. And I felt like that would be a real gift, especially in this moment where the world is so confusing. And we children and adults both could use, that sense of connection and guidance that His Holiness provides. And so I was starting this imprint and thought, what kinds of books would feel really meaningful and could affect change and could just bring comfort, but also have a sense of sort of activism behind them in that. And so I just wrote a letter, and I wrote to His Holiness to say, I had the opportunity to meet you so many years ago. This is how it affected me. And I think now, as kids are navigating so much in the world, it would be so powerful for them to get to hear directly from you. Would you ever consider making a picture book? This is what a picture book is. And of course, our whole team would be here to help in whatever way we could, if you think that it's something that is something that you'd be willing and wanting to do. And so I sent that off, and just sort of crossed my fingers and hoped. And then, I wasn't there when he received the letter, of course, but I was told that he said something along the lines of how, can I teach all the animals? I mean, I can't, but can I teach the children? He says, I think it's my duty to do so. And I was told this, and I said, is that a yes? so that's how I found out that he was interested. And then I heard back from his team there to sort of say, this is when His Holiness will be able to see you. So then I got on a flight and went to Dharamshala, spent some days there, and got to interview him. And through his own stories about his childhood, his teachings, we've created the Seed of Compassion.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for sharing that. And the book is just so beautiful. So I want to ask you now, can you share a little bit more about the conversations you had maybe with His Holiness, maybe something a little more detail about the book?
Of course.
Because we like to hear.
Certainly. So the book really covers both a little bit about His Holiness's childhood, because we really felt that's showing His Holiness as a child will help children today feel that moment of seeing, I'm kind of like this too. I can be inspired in this way. It doesn't just feel like somebody who you admire from a great distance and don't realize that you can strive to carry the same compassion in your daily life and work just as a regular kid. And so a lot of the story talks about His Holiness's childhood as he grows up, and then his teachings now. So I think we have some interiors that maybe we can share from the book. It opens with his childhood at home. You see the kind of environment in which he grew up. He shared a wonderful story about how one of his favorite jobs, because he grew up, as in a family of sort of farmers and herders, that kind of thing, that his favorite job was to collect the eggs from the chickens. So there you see him doing that. And that he had, the scorpions in the home for his company, and that how he learned so much about compassion, and that this seed of compassion in him was really planted through his relationship with his mother. So I think we have maybe an image around that. And I loved this story that he shared. I think he says it
He
often.
shares this often, yes.
It's so lovely. It really charmed me so much about how he was, maybe
And the paintings are also really lovely.
Yes, the artist that we worked with, Bao Lu, was quite a new artist, and he really did such beautiful, beautiful work. But here we have His Holiness riding on the shoulders of his mother, and he shared the story about how he was a little bit naughty, and that when he wanted to go left, he would yank her left ear. When he wanted to go right, he would yank her right ear, and somehow she would still humor him. And so it just showed a side of him that was so playful and I think relatable to a lot of kids. And then he shared the story of how the search party looking for the next Dalai Lama came to his home. And so here's the moment where he's identifying objects of the previous Dalai Lama, and they realize that they have found the boy they've been looking for. So it kind of goes through the periods of his childhood. And then we see about how he travels to Lhasa and begins his formal education and training. But even in between those moments of training, he shared many stories of how when he had a sliver of time, he would always love to tinker. He talks a lot about how he loves to tinker with clocks and watches and see how mechanical
He
things
always said
work.
that if I had a choice, I might have been an engineer in my life.
Exactly. It was quite amazing to hear him speak because he just shows sort of an insatiable curiosity. And that was also such a diverse range of things that occupy the life of his mind. And that was really what was so wonderful in getting to spend a little time with him. Was he would go from talking about philosophy to sharing interests like this, engineering, and just had such a breadth of knowledge. And that was really wonderful. But even then, always shared the space for vulnerability, the space to make mistakes and do better the next day. So here we see that even when he was interested in mechanical things, sometimes it didn't work out quite as planned. And so here he's crashed a car into a tree. They're all true stories. And then he went on to speak about compassion, about how this is one of the subjects that he was most interested in his education, and how he believes that seed exists in everyone, and especially in all children, and how love is the thing that nurtures that seed. And so in the opening letter in the book, His Holiness shares that he probably won't have a chance to meet every single child in the world. That would be quite a remarkable feat. But through this book, he hopes that he has the opportunity to speak with them directly and share this message, and I think remind them of the strength that they have within themselves to nurture this seed, the power that it brings when we do that, how it builds self-confidence, and how that really nurtures community. And I love that he shares, especially that one line, as I said before, that you can make mistakes, that you can train your mind to be more compassionate, but you may not get it right away. We're all just humans, and especially the target audience for this book are children, and it's a difficult thing to learn, to pause maybe your first impulse of anger, things like this, and that in fact, if you try to do that over time, you'll get better at it. And he says it's sort of like when you learn to play an instrument or when you learn to swim, you don't simply know how to do it right away, but that we can practice and that we can improve in how improve in our skills, just as we do with all other skills, also with how we learn to be compassionate toward one another. So that is sort of an overview of the book.
Yes, no, then you've captured in a beautiful, simple manner the essence of His Holiness's words, and it's really moving kind of to go through, and it's wonderful to share with the kids. And as I was looking into Googling the book, The Seed of Compassion, I also saw that there were groups with teachers and kids and parents doing activities on compassion-based, activities, planting seeds and things like that. Is that something you've noticed from people having read the book and engaging after that?
Yeah, I think the book has been so wonderfully received. And I think you pointed to it that you see parents and children or adults and children engaging with the book together. And there's so many different ways that one can do that, whether it's just in, reading circles and sharing it or sharing it at bedtime or using it to inspire daily activities or doing symbolic activities like planting a sapling to kind of make concrete the metaphor that they're talking about here. So it has been really wonderful. And I think the nice thing is that families and communities find their own ways with text. That's sort of the wonder of books. And here, I think it's a way of saying that we, with this book, we can share the message of His Holiness, and it can go anywhere with a child. And then how they decide to incorporate into their lives or share with other kids is really up to them. So it's been wonderful to see all the creative ways in which people are doing it. I think earlier we talked a little bit about, where all is this book being received? And I think that's the thing too, is that we've seen it in translation in maybe more than 20 countries, in more than 20 languages in more than 50 countries. So it's really all over the world because obviously the message of His Holiness is something that has a global interest.
Global interest, yes. And also in Tibetan, I hope.
Yes, definitely. It's in Tibetan, and I think we may have also done it. There might be multiple translations. There might have been one in Tibetan and one in what is it that most Tibetans in India speak in Dharamshala? Is it always Tibetan, or there's a
It's Tibetan.
Is it always Tibetan? I will look up because there was
Yes,
there's two translations we had that I was really excited to see, and there's even Marathi also. So we have a couple of Indian languages too. I think 20 international languages, and most certainly Tibetan.
Wonderful. Yes. The compassion and is something that His Holiness always talks about, and it's one of his principal three commitments. And even in the United States, from one of his earliest travels, he always was challenging scientists into saying, why do you only study anger and stress, and you should be studying compassion? Why aren't you studying love and compassion? So I think he played, and I will hear from Professor Negi more on that. And before we do into that, I did, as researching for this, find a clip of His Holiness speaking in 2007. There was a large gathering of in Seattle, a conference, a 5-day conference, also called the Seeds of Compassion. And His Holiness sent a message to the organizers, and I wanted to play that for us. It's again His Holiness looking to the camera, and message here.
As one of the 6 billion human beings, I always have sort of serious sort of concern about the future of humanity, because I feel that's everybody's responsibility, because we are one of them. If the 6 billion human beings happy, we individual certainly will have happy life. If the 6 billion human beings facing more crisis, then one individual, no matter how sort of successful individual, they eventually will suffer. So I always believe the happy life in the individual level or family level or community level or national or global level, they're ultimately very much related with warm-heartedness or compassion. And the compassion, usually I describe infinite compassion, unlimited compassion, unbiased compassion. That's a seed from birth. Everybody have that seed.
With that, Gisela, I want to ask you, you have served His Holiness so many years now, working on this Mind Science Initiative and the Sea Learning programs. Can you share a little bit about that journey, about the interactions on this Mind and Science initiatives?
Thank you, Tenchola. And I want to just thank Namrata for such a beautiful book and really wonderful stories that you portrayed through this book. Yes, as His Holiness himself mentioned that compassion, I mean, he sees compassion as really the key for our well-being, of our survival. As he often says that love and compassion are not luxuries, they are necessities, without which humanity cannot survive. And, this goes to his recognition that we are social beings. And as social beings, if we do not find a way to connect with each other with a certain sense of warmth and tenderness, a meaningful connection, then society suffers, but also the individual suffers. So, as you well know, Tenchola, that His Holiness has engaged with scientists for many, many years, from his basic commitment to promoting basic human values. He sees that in the education, particularly in the modern societies, we have focused too much on the material development and have neglected to a certain degree the inner values. And his first commitment in life is, as a human being, to help promote those basic human values like love, compassion. And I know that he was the inspiration and the encouragement for the neuroscientist Dr. Richard Davidson for him to explore the positive qualities of the mind, that instead of looking at only from the disease model, the depression and how to fix it, but rather to look at positive qualities like love, compassion, and that's what led him to establish this Center for Healthy Minds at the University of Wisconsin. And through His Holiness's writings, through his engagement with the scientists, I think that we are seeing now that there's a much greater appreciation and the recognition for compassion, even in the business world. There are many books now by well-known writers that seeing that how the model of business has to also be changed from the traditional model of just focusing on profit to really focusing on the people, the people, the centered. And that's where the care, the compassion, and those are the key ingredients for building the more cohesive, more cooperative and trusting the workplace culture.
As His Holiness always says that you teach about how to be healthy and how to be cleanliness and all of that, but you also have to teach about cleanliness of the mind and how to keep the healthy mind, because healthy mind impacts the healthy body and all of that. So, Professor Negi, now, can you tell us about the C-learning program at Emory University? Because this is all connected with that, and you have been working almost 20 years on that, if I'm on that program. So, can you tell us about that?
Yes, certainly. As in my introduction, Tenchola, as you mentioned about the compassion training program that we developed at Emory University, that was the kind of the precursor to C-learning, really. It started with His Holiness's advice, if you will, back in 1998 when he inaugurated a partnership between Emory University and one of the Tibetan monasteries called Tibet Monastery. At the time, he also gave the commencement speech at Emory University, and in that speech, he emphasized the importance of compassion. He said that we can have all the different technological, knowledge, but how we use that depends on the person. A person has warm-heartedness, if it comes from compassion, that knowledge would be used constructively. And we took that to heart, and then developed the CBCT, cognitive-based compassion training, back in 2004, 2005, as a research study with students and other populations. In 2015, His Holiness asked us to develop a framework, a comprehensive framework, and some curricula for bringing this in schools, K through 12, because His Holiness, thinks in the long term. He sees that to create a culture of compassion, the compassionate outlook to become as our cultural kind of, mindset. It will require bringing compassion in education all the way through, kindergarten through higher education. And so His Holiness has written extensively as he refers to this education as the secular ethics, that the ethics for the new millennium and the beyond religion ethics for the whole world. In these books, he has, of course, articulated the framework, the key skills and the ways to do that. But he needed a framework for the educators, and then the curriculum built around that. So we developed this, and in 2019, it was launched internationally in Delhi with His Holiness the Dalai Lama. And we had 37 countries represented there, over 1,000 educators, policymakers, and the C learning, social, emotional, and ethical learning, that what His Holiness often also referred to as secular ethics or the universal ethics. This is basically, it brings many new kind of tools or the elements to existing social emotional learning movement. As you may know, social emotional learning movement started, about 30 some years ago in the 90s, early 90s, and they focus on 5 kind of competencies, self-awareness, self-management, empathy, social skills, and the decision-making. But as Dr. Daniel Goleman, who is one of the pioneers in this movement, he recognizes that social emotional learning field needs, many new kind of elements. Today, he wrote this book in 2014, I believe, 13 or 14. So in C learning, we draw contents from His Holiness's writing, his teachings, his lectures, and it is around 3 kind of the core, what we call the 3 domains, the 3 domains and the 3 dimensions, has to do with the personal domain, interpersonal domain, and the systems domain. It's around attention, kind of the awareness, compassion, and then how to engage, equipped with awareness and compassion. So the compassion is really the container in this, but C learning brings or complements the existing social emotional learning framework with like attention training in a very systematic way to enhance attention, cultivate care and compassion. Compassion is trained, as Namrata was saying, that that we all have, as His Holiness has said, that we all have the seed, but how do we expand that using our intelligence and the various ways to how to bring that seed into full flourishing? And that's what the C learning provides that. And then it brings the systems thinking, interdependence lens to understanding, that our situation, our condition, and in that way, then it encourages a more the ethical outlook. So in that way, as Dr. Goleman says, that the C learning, he sees it as SEL 2.0 because of this very crucial added elements it brings to the social emotional learning. And C learning, as I mentioned, it was launched in 2019, and it's now it's implemented globally.
Thank you, Geshe-la. I want to ask you, to share maybe some personal experiences or examples that you have seen or come across from working on these programs, because when it's one thing to hear about what it is and how it is formed and what it is, but then it's also interesting to hear like a direct example or experiences or something like that. If you
Thank
can.
you, thank you. So, I've been working in this area for many years with the adults, with the compassion with adults, but also with the, not so directly with the K through 12 education, because I teach at a university, but with the undergrads. But in developing C learning framework and then working with, our team who bring this into the K through 12 education, what is really encouraging for me to see is that the educators, when we offer this, they find that in this program, it actually helps them, that it helps them cope with their own stresses. It helps their well-being, and so that they can be more present with the children. They find that the C learning tools are over 90%. They find it helpful for themselves personally and for the children in the classroom. And this is very true that right now there's a study that's ongoing in Brazil, for example. Overwhelmingly, the teachers find that very important. I think that it is important. We're going to do the study with the students themselves also, but it's we're in the process of doing this study. But we first did with the implementation with the teachers, and to see that overwhelming number of teachers finding that how helpful it is, and then when they introduce the students, it changes the classroom dynamics, which is, I think, really important, because if you see the surveys, 90% of the teachers today, particularly during this pandemic, find themselves, suffering with burnout. The over 94% of the teachers, they find that their students need the help with the mental health and that cope with the stresses and like that, and the C learning strategies and the tools, the skills, it addresses not only how to manage their emotions, as you were saying, that His Holiness is really, he sees that like the physical hygiene, we do need to teach children emotional hygiene, and so those are some of the things that it's still early, C learning, but anecdotally, we're hearing from teachers all around the world really encouraging feedback, and over 150,000 or so teachers have engaged our C 101 around the world, for around over 100 countries, and this is His Holiness's vision, how to infuse compassion in education, but also in the, in the society, in other fields of human society.
Thank you, Lobsang. And then the educators program that is available on your on the website, and it's something anybody can sign up for, or is it? Am I right? And is this something that not just teachers, but now in this new situation, parents are also struggling, forced to become teachers. So is that something that's available for ordinary non-teachers who deal with teaching kids and others to take up?
Yes, as I mentioned, that C learning is intended for global dissemination, and it is a gift really from His Holiness, and all the resources in our program are free of charge. Anyone from around the world can take the C101, just going to our website, clearning.emory.edu. And as I mentioned, that over 150,000 so have engaged that platform. And once you do the C101, all the material, we have the curriculum for early elementary school, the late elementary school, middle school, high school curriculum is being finalized now. It will be ready very soon. And there are a host of other activities, like, for example, standalone activities for children, particularly during this pandemic. And the parents have been using this with the children, actually, and we have been very happy to see how parents are engaging those activities. But for the long term, to make it sustainable, we do have a very kind of the comprehensive the plan, and that involves training the facilitators. Our team has been providing training to the educators, but before the pandemic, we did it in person. During pandemic, we have been doing this online. That again, they can any teacher interested can contact us. But then we have a program called Facilitators, C-Learning Facilitators Training. That actually is training the teacher trainers. Basically, we have done about 150 or so last year and 250 or so this year. From last year it was from about 14 countries or so. This year, 37 countries are participating in the facilitator training. Those facilitators can then train various teachers. And then at the same time, we have many partnerships around the world, the organizations, some big at the national level, others are NGOs on it, and then some on kind of the district levels or the school levels.
So thank you, Lobsang.
Thank you.
I'm going to check with our team if we have viewer questions at this point. And my first question that I have here is, what age would you recommend introducing this book to children? So, Namrata, maybe you can address your book, and Kishla, you could address in terms of the compassion training.
Certainly. So I think it's a picture book with not a great deal of text. So it really varies on what you think is appropriate for your child, but I'd say probably 5 and up is perfectly fine.
And C-learning is, as I mentioned, that it is introduced, at early elementary level, so 5, 6. Again, some of the teachers certainly can utilize our curriculum for kindergarten level as well. But at this point, it's mainly introduced at the first grade level.
There's another question that says, are there plans for children's books from His Holiness in the future? I don't know if you have an answer for that.
I'm afraid I don't have an answer for that now. Of course, I would love that very much, but I understand His Holiness has a number of things on his plate. So nothing that is in the works with us.
I think His Holiness probably has more than books, a whole set of compassion learning for children there. So anything else that you'd like to share with our viewers from either of you? And if those listening, if you have questions, please enter them in the feedback section in the comment section or email them to us.
Of course, only after the fact I remembered that it's also in Ladakhi in addition to Tibetan. That's what I was trying to come up with. So yeah, I feel like if readers are looking for this book, hopefully viewers from around the world can be able to find it in in their language of choice, but of course it's available here anywhere.
It's available everywhere, but it's also available on the ICT store. So please visit the ICT store. We have this book there, as well as numerous others. There's also another book written in collaboration with His Holiness and artist Rima Fujita. That's also on a bookstore. So please visit the bookstore. And I think
I just wanted to say that on our website, clearning.emory.edu, parents or teachers, they can find also, we have a playbook for children, and it's specifically about during this pandemic times, how to work with their emotions, but also it has compassion, how to cultivate compassion through a playbook. So that's available. It's again free, and it can be accessed through clearning.emory.edu.
Thank you, Geshe-la. That's a fabulous resource for all those parents listening in today, or not just parents, aunts and uncles, and anyone, grandparents also.
I'll certainly visit with my daughter. Thank you.
Oh. And thank you so very much for both of you for making the time to join us today. It's been a pleasure talking with you both. Thank you for your work in sharing His Holiness's words and wisdom with a larger audience. And I know our ICT members really appreciate and care for that. So thank you again for joining us today.
Thank you so much.
With that, we're at the end of our session today, and I would like to remind everyone we'll be back again next month with another episode of Tibet Talks, and our conversation will be with Peggy Callahan and Geshe Thupten Jimbala on a movie called Mission Joy about His Holiness and Archbishop Tutu. So thank you all for joining in today. And before I end off, I do want to say that today, as we are also meeting over here, there's a giant spotlight on China flaunting its muscles by hosting the prestigious Olympic Games. And it is also the time for us to remember that we have to hold China accountable for the atrocities it is committing within its borders as we also watch these games. So, okay. And with that, please join us at International Campaign for Tibet to learn more. You can visit our website, savetibet.org, to learn more about the situation in Tibet and support our work as well. So we are here because of your support, and please share and like this video, and see you again next month. Thank you.